Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation. Jocelyn is my colleague who is sharing the role with me at Tharawal Aboriginal Medical Service, so she's up here with me for moral support. So we were very pleased to win the tender to deliver a counselling service and an experiential therapeutic service for Aboriginal people in our region. So mental health and Aboriginal people, 1 in 3 Aboriginal people can experience very high levels of distress, and the suicide rate is twice that of non-Indigenous people. So we have a big job ahead of us in this region, given that Tharawal services probably the largest urban Aboriginal community in Australia. So how our model came about, I've had an equine-assisted psychotherapy practice at my farm at Bargo for the last 8 years. I've been a psychologist for about 20 years, and I've always had a passion for assisting people who have experienced childhood trauma and neglect. So the model has come out of that long experience working with people, often with transgenerational trauma. So I've had about 8 years experience in equine-assisted psychotherapy, having done lots of training in that. But also over the last 5 years, I was invited to provide a counselling service at Tharawal Aboriginal Medical Service, which started off in 2012, just 1 day a week. And since then, we've been able to grow the service using this model to this year, when we can offer 5 days a week, which includes Jocelyn's service as well as mine. So it's evidence-based in that being psychologists, we are fairly well versed in most of the models of therapy that are around and have been around for quite a while. But we both have a basis in personal construct psychology, which is about co-creation of a person's reality. And part of the idea that comes out of personal construct psychology is people moving towards being an optimal person. So personal construct psychology itself rejects the medical notion of mental illness, and so it fits well with the Aboriginal notion of social and emotional well-being. Last year I wrote a paper about my experience over 4 years working with the Aboriginal community, and I was very pleased when the Board of Governance of the Tharawal Aboriginal Corporation endorsed my paper in July last year. This year, together with Jocelyn and another psychologist, we wrote a paper which I presented at an international congress on personal construct psychology in Montreal in July. So, and now we get to the model, and this is the nuts and bolts of it, and I think I want to present this to you because this is our difference. And so through this model, I believe we're offering people something different to what they might find in other areas of mental health. So there are 5 aspects to the model, and I like to think of it as our hand with 5 fingers. Trust is the thumb, because everything hinges on trust. You know, the fingers aren't as useful without the thumb, which is trust. Trust, validation of a person's emotional experience. There's a lot of work in emotion regulation, and then after that a person manages to develop reflective self-awareness. And the 5th aspect of the model is about that dispersion of dependency or integration in a community. And what we've learned through working with traumatised people is that they are very often isolated and they've lost trust, and it's very difficult to get them back into community, which is so important for their social and emotional well-being. So the first part of the model is about building trust, and it's about the therapeutic alliance in counselling. We are concerned about giving people a safe place, and also about the quality of the relationship between the client and the counsellor. The emotional attunement of the counsellor is important to the client, and some researchers have called this sacred space or reverence. So that's about the quality of the therapeutic relationship. The task to be done in therapy is psychoeducation and learning and practicing skills. And also building trust is about helping the client to determine their own goals for therapy. Validation of a person's emotional experience through telling of story and through the Only Human app about storytelling was great because that fits really well with what we've found working with Aboriginal people. They need to be able to tell their story. And from our perspective, the most important thing we can do is actually to acknowledge people's emotional experience. I come from a viewpoint that intense emotions are not wrong and they are not bad. They simply tell us about the importance of something to a person. Psychoeducation is also important to help people understand what their emotions are telling them. So emotion regulation, there's a lot that we do in this, and people who have come from a traumatised background, especially from childhood, have great difficulty initially regulating their emotional experience. So the 4 basic emotions that I use, just as a simple checklist, is fear, anger, sadness, and joy. And without an experience of joy or without recollection of some happy memories, people have very little to understand what's wrong with them and what they need to change and how to make life better for themselves. So fear is the body's sense response to threat, and this sense of threat may be from past experiences, but it also may be threat in the present, and as therapists that's what we help the client understand. And interventions are about safety towards self-protection and self-care. We then deal with anger, and anger represents the body's response to injustice. So we often validate people's anger because it's the anger is their motivation and their courage to change things that aren't okay for them. And particularly in the Aboriginal population, there are a lot of injustices, and Aboriginal people generally have become very submissive and won't speak up against injustice. And so part of what we're doing too is encouraging them to actually speak up for their rights and against injustices. So interventions, when we're dealing with anger, are solution focused towards improved communication, assertiveness, and just empowering people to be able to be strong in themselves. Sadness, there's a lot of sadness in the Aboriginal community, and sadness represents the body's response to loss. So you can see that everything we do is not just cognitive, it's not language-based, it's not like cognitive behaviour therapy, but we're trying to look at the person in a much more holistic way, that all of our experience is based in the body and comes from our bodily experience, not just our language-based thinking and speaking. And to me, this is the most important part of the model, that the human brain resets itself through the active expression of grief. And so I often say to people, have you allowed yourself to cry? And so often people have been socialised that it's weak to cry, or it's, there's something wrong with me if I cry. However, that's the way our body actually restores itself and heals itself from grief and loss. So joy is the contrast to all of those other emotions that people generally don't like. And for us, the experience of play, and this is where we fit with Judith and Star for Kids program, that adults can play too, and often we're trying to teach adults how to play and how to be more playful. So play and laughter provide the contrast necessary to create the conduit for change in a person's life. So it's only when people experience that difference in their life they can move toward a life that they would feel better about. And also joy is having a sense of personal agency. Often when we see people who have come from an experience of long-term trauma, they are very disempowered. And so to empower people and to help them say, I can be the driver of my life, not just the passenger, is a very important thing. From emotion regulation then comes reflective self-awareness. And this is being able to tell a person being able to tell their story in new ways and being able to put into words what their experience has actually been. So whether it comes after the emotion regulation or at the same time, this is the model, but it doesn't always follow in suit.
Flexible.
Yeah, we are flexible, yes. And I think the important thing about reflective self-awareness is being able to take that step back from what's happening and actually be able to think about, how do I solve this problem? And for people to have the confidence, and it's certainly, we come from a problem-solving approach, having that confidence that no matter what happens, we will find ways to solve the problem. And certainly just even asking for help is a really important skill in that. Self-mastery and Diri are two aspects of reflective self-awareness. And Diri, according to Marion Ungana Bowman, it involves the inner deep listening and quiet still awareness. It recognises the deep spring that is inside us, which calls to us as we call on it. It is somewhat akin to contemplation. And this is part of Aboriginal wisdom that we have lost in modern day society. The fifth part of the model is about dispersion of dependency, or trying to get the person to integrate back into their community. People need social connection, we are social creatures, we need a sense of belonging, and we help people to find their own sustainable support network. So that's the model and how we're delivering it. As I said, we are two psychologists at Tharawal Medical Centre, and we're both working 2.5 days a week. We offer after-hours appointments on a Thursday evening, as well as covering 4 days a week between us. In the Wingecarribee, we have a mental health social worker, Francine Bartlett, who is working towards establishing an Aboriginal specific counselling service in the Wingecarribee area using this model of therapy. So this is fairly new for the Wingecarribee, and Francine's out there doing the groundwork to offer an alternative model of therapy for Aboriginal people. And the other aspect of our service is a group program at my equine assisted psychotherapy practice at Bargo called Equine Time. And so we've been funded by the PHN for 4 different kinds of groups. One is, and these are the names that we've called them, Field Days for Women Recovering from Trauma and Grief, Farming Skills for Men Recovering from Trauma and Grief, and then we have 2 other groups which we run on Saturdays. So it's for mothers and daughters, with the daughters aged 8 to 12, and for fathers and sons with boys aged 8 to 12. We've run a very successful boys group in the past. For these boys aged 8 to 12, ADHD, ODD, any kind of diagnosis you want to put on them, and we've seen really good results with them. And of course, girls, and particularly teenage girls, love horses. So, when I offer a psychological service, I can say, yes, but I've got horses. And it's very attractive to young people. So this is just an example of an equine assisted session. The person with the horse is actually my horse specialist. In equine sessions, we always work with 2 people, 2 facilitators, a mental health professional and a horse person. And we use a lot of metaphor. And this game, we call them games, this game was set up to help a client understand the importance of consistency and constancy. And from personal construct psychology, we believe that this is what children need to grow up as regulated people. So constancy, we use the lead rope with the horse as a metaphor for attachment, and holding the lead rope is a secure attachment. So to the horse it says, I am with you, I will not let you go, you will come with me. And consistency is about the pattern of events in a person's life, and how that basic routine and the practice of that routine is very important for people to grow up being emotionally regulated. So I'll just play the video and that'll be the end of our presentation. Oh, yes, here you go.
It won't be a minute, sorry.
So as you can see, equine therapy is actually very non-verbal, but there's a lot that we can pick up from people through their body language. And this example also is about the body language of the person that's actually giving commands to the horse. Well, not commands, but a clear message and a clear direction as to what the person wishes the horse to do. Horse therapy works because in lots of ways horses are very similar to humans. They have different personalities, they like to play games, they're social creatures, and they are very perceptive of picking up human emotional experience. And horses look for a safe leader, so you have to prove to a horse that you are strong enough and kind enough that they will actually want to follow you. And so that's part of the metaphor that we use when we're working with horses. Thank you.